The Outsiders, Day 5. I did the best I could. He went ahead and washed it anyway, using the bar of soap he'd bought. I was glad I had to run away with him instead of with Two-Bit or Steve or Dally. That would be one thing they'd never think of, soap. I gave him Dally's jacket to wrap up in, and he sat shivering in the sunlight on the back steps, leaning against the door, combing his hair back. It was the first time I could see that he had eyebrows. He didn't look like Johnny. His forehead was whiter where his bangs had been. It would have been funny if we hadn't been so scared. He was still shivering with cold. "I guess," he said weakly. "I guess we're disguised." I leaned back next to him sullenly. "I guess so." "Oh, shoot," Johnny said with fake cheerfulness. "It's just hair." "Shoot nothing," I snapped. "It took me a long time to get that hair just the way I wanted it. And besides, this just ain't us. It's like being in a Halloween costume we can't get out of." "Well, we get to get used to it," Johnny said with finality. "We're in big trouble, and it's our looks or us." I started eating a candy bar. "I'm still tired," I said. To my surprise, the ground blurred and I felt tears running down my cheeks. I brushed them off hurriedly. Johnny looked as miserable as I felt. "I'm sorry I cut your hair off, Pony Boy." "Oh, it ain't that," I said between bites of chocolate. "I mean, not all of it. I'm just a little spooky. I really don't know what's the matter. I'm just mixed up." "I know," Johnny said through chattering teeth as we went inside. "Things have been happening so fast." I put my arm across his shoulders to warm him up. "Two-Bit should have been in that little one-horse store. Man, we're in the middle of nowhere. The nearest house is 2 miles away. Things were laying out wide open, just waiting for somebody slick like Two-Bit to come and pick them up. He could have walked out with half the store." He leaned back beside me. I could feel him trembling. "Good old Two-Bit," he said in a quavering voice. "He must have been as homesick as I was." "Remember how he was wisecracking last night?" I said. "Last night. Just last night we were walking Cherry and Marcia over to Two-Bit's. Just last night we were laying in the lot, looking up at the stars and dreaming." "Stop it!" Johnny gasped from between clenched teeth. "Shut up about last night. I killed a kid last night. He could have been over 17 or 18. I killed him. How'd you like to live with that?" He was crying. I held him like Soda had held him the day we found him lying in the lot. "I didn't mean to," he finally blurted out, "but they were drowning you, and I was so scared." He was quiet for a minute. "There sure is a lot of blood in people." He got up suddenly and began pacing back and forth, slapping his pockets. "What we gonna do?" I was crying by then. It was getting dark and I was cold and lonesome. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back, but the tears came anyway. "This is my fault," Johnny said in a miserable voice. He had stopped crying when I started. "For bringing a little 13-year-old kid along. You ought to go home. You can't get into any trouble. You didn't kill him." "No," I screamed at him. "I'm 14. I've been 14 for a month, and I'm in as much as you are. I'll stop crying in a minute. I can't help it." He slumped down beside me. "I didn't mean it like that, Pony Boy. Don't cry, Pony. We'll be okay. Don't cry." I leaned against him and bawled until I went to sleep. I woke up late that night. Johnny was resting against the wall and I was asleep on his shoulder. "Johnny," I yawned, "you awake?" I was warm and sleepy. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We ain't gonna cry no more, are we?" "Nope, we're all cried out. We're getting used to the idea. We're gonna be okay now." "That was what I thought," I said drowsily. Then, for the first time since Dally and I had sat down behind those girls at the nightly double, I relaxed. We could take whatever was coming now. The next 4 or 5 days were the longest days I've ever spent in my life. We killed time by reading Gone with the Wind and playing poker. Johnny sure did like that book, although he didn't know anything about the Civil War, and even less about plantations, and I had to explain a lot of it to him. It amazed me how Johnny could get more meaning out of some of the stuff in there than I could. I was supposed to be the deep one. Johnny had failed a year in school and never made good grades. He couldn't grasp anything that was shoved at him too fast, and I guess his teachers thought he was just plain dumb. But he wasn't. He was just a little slow to get things, and he liked to explore things once he did get them. He was especially stuck on the Southern gentlemen, impressed with their manners and charm. "I bet they were cool old guys," he said, his eyes glowing, after I had read the part about riding into sure death because they were gallant. "They remind me of Dally." "Dally," I said, startled. "Shoot, he ain't got any more manners than I do, and you saw how he treated those girls the other night. Soda's more like them than them Southern boys." "Yeah, in the manners bit. In the charm, too, I guess," Johnny said slowly. "But one night I saw Dally getting picked up by the fuzz, and he kept real cool and calm the whole time. They was getting him for breaking out the windows in the school building, and it was Two-Bit who did that. And Dally knew it, but he just took the sentence without batting an eye or even denying it. That's gallant." That was the first time I realized the extent of Johnny's heroship for Dally Winston. Of all of us, Dally was the one I liked least. He didn't have Soda's understanding, or Dash, or Two-Bit's humor, or even Derry's Superman qualities, but I realized that these three appealed to me because they were like the heroes in the novels I read. Dally was real. I liked my books and clouds and sunsets. Dally was so real, he scared me. Johnny and I never went to the front of the church. You could see the front from the road, and sometimes farm kids rode their horses by on their way to the store. So we stayed in the very back, usually sitting on the steps and looking across the valley. We could see for miles, see the ribbon of highway and the small dots that were houses and cars. We couldn't watch the sunset, since the back faced east, but I loved to look at the colors of the fields and the soft shadings of the horizon. One morning I woke up earlier than usual. Johnny and I slept huddled together for warmth. Dally had been right when he said it would get cold where we were going. Being careful not to wake Johnny up, I went to sit on the steps and smoke a cigarette. The dawn was coming then. All the lower valley was covered with mist, and sometimes little pieces of it broke off and floated away in small clouds. The sky was lighter in the east, and the horizon was a thin golden line. The clouds changed from gray to pink, and the mist was touched with gold. There was a silent moment when everything held its breath, and then the sun rose. It was beautiful. Golly, Johnny's voice beside me made me jump. That sure was pretty. Yeah, I sighed, wishing I had some paint to do a picture with while the sight was still fresh in my mind. The mist was what was pretty, Johnny said. All gold and silver. I said, trying to blow a smoke ring. Too bad it couldn't stay like that all the time. Nothing gold can stay. I was remembering a poem I had read once. What? Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. Johnny was staring at me. Where'd you learn that? That was what I meant. Robert Frost wrote it. He meant more to it than I'm getting, though. I was trying to find the meaning the poet had in mind, but it eluded me. I always remembered it because I never quite got what he meant by it. You know, Johnny said slowly, I never noticed colors and clouds and stuff until you kept reminding me about them. It seems like they were never there before. He thought for a minute. Your family sure is funny. And what happens to be so funny about it? I asked stiffly. Johnny looked at me quickly. I didn't mean nothing. I meant, well, Soda kind of looks like your mother did, but he acts just exactly like your father. And Derry is the spitting image of your father, but he ain't wild and laughing all the time like he was. He acts like your mother, and you don't act like either one. I know, I said. Well, I said, thinking this over, you ain't like any of the gang. I mean, I couldn't tell Two-Bit or Steve or even Derry about the sunrise and clouds and stuff. I couldn't even remember that poem around them. I mean, they just don't dig. Just you and Soda Pop. And maybe Cherry Valance. Johnny shrugged. Yeah, he said with a sigh. I guess we're different. Shoot, I said, blowing a perfect smoke ring. Maybe they are. By the fifth day, I was so tired of bologna, I nearly got sick every time I looked at it. We had eaten all our candy bars in the first 2 days. I was dying for a Pepsi. I'm what you might call a Pepsi addict. I drink them like a fiend, and going for 5 days without one was about to kill me. Johnny promised to get some if we ran out of supplies and had to get some more, but that didn't help me right then. I was smoking a lot more there than I usually did. I guess because it was something to do, although Johnny warned me that I would get sick smoking so much. We were careful with our cigarettes. If that old church ever caught fire, there'd be no stopping it. On the 5th day, I had read up to Sherman's siege of Atlanta in Gone with the Wind. Owed Johnny $150 from poker games, smoked 2 packs of Camels, and, as Johnny had predicted, got sick. I hadn't eaten anything all day, and smoking on an empty stomach doesn't make you feel real great. I curled up in a corner to sleep off the smoke. I was just about asleep when I heard, as if from a great distance, a low, long whistle that went off in a sudden high note. I was too sleepy to pay it any attention, although Johnny didn't have any reason to be whistling like that. He was sitting on the back steps, trying to read Gone with the Wind. I had almost decided that I had dreamed the outside world, and there was nothing real but bologna sandwiches and the Civil War, and the old church and the mist in the valley. It seemed to me that I had always lived in the church, or maybe lived during the Civil War, and had somehow got transplanted. That shows you what a wild imagination I have. A toe nudged me in the ribs. Glory, said a rough but familiar voice. He looks different with his hair like that. I rolled over and sat up, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes and yawning. Suddenly, I blinked. Hey, Dally! Hey, pony boy, he grinned down at me. Or should I say, sleeping beauty. I never thought I'd live to see the day when I would be so glad to see Dally Winston, but right then he meant one thing, contact with the outside world, and suddenly became real and vital. How's Soda Pop? Are the Fuzz after us? Is Derry all right? Do the boys know where we are? What? Hold on, kid, Dally broke in. I can't answer everything at once. You two want to go get something to eat first? I skipped breakfast and I'm about starved. You're starved? Johnny was so indignant he nearly squeaked. I remembered the baloney. Is it safe to go out? I asked eagerly. Yep. Dally searched his shirt pocket for a cigarette, and finding none, he said, Got a cancer stick, Johnny Cake? Johnny tossed him a whole package. The Fuzz won't be looking for you around here, Dally said, lighting up. They think you've lit out for Texas. I've got Buck's T-Bird parked down the road a little way. Gosh almighty, boys, ain't you been eating anything? Johnny looked startled. Yeah, whatever gave you the idea we ain't? Dally shook his head. You're both pale, and you've lost weight. After this, get out in the sun more. You look like you've been through the mill. I started to say, Look who's talking, but decided it would be safer not to. Dally needed a shave. A stubble of colorless beard covered his jaw, and he looked like he was the one who'd been sleeping in the clothes for a week instead of us. I knew he hadn't seen a barber in months, but it was safer not to get mouthy with Dally Winston. Hey, Ponyboy, he fumbled with a piece of paper in his pocket. I got a letter for you. A letter? Who from? The president. Of course, stupid. It's from Soda. Soda Pop, I said, bewildered. But how did he know? He came over to Buck's a couple days ago for something and found that sweatshirt. I told him I didn't know where you were, but he didn't believe me. He gave me this letter and half his paycheck to give you. Kid, you ought to see Derry. He's taking this mighty hard. I wasn't listening. I leaned back against the side of the church and read, Ponyboy. Well, I guess you got into some trouble, huh? Derry and me nearly went nuts when you ran out like that. Derry is awful sorry he hit you. You know he didn't mean it. And then you and Johnny turned up missing, and what with that dead kid in the park and Dally getting hauled into the station? Well, it scared us something awful. The police came by to question us, and we told them as much as we could. I can't believe little old Johnny could kill somebody. I know Dally knows where you are, but you know him. He keeps his trap shut and won't tell me nothing. Derry hasn't got the slightest notion where you're at, and it is nearly killing him. I wish you'd come back and turn yourselves in, but I guess you can't since Johnny might get hurt. You sure are famous. You got a paragraph in the newspaper even. Take care and say hi to Johnny for us. Soda Pop Curtis. He could improve his spelling, I thought after reading it through 3 or 4 times. How come you got hauled in? I asked Dally. Shoot, kid, he grinned wolfishly. Them boys at the station know me by now. I get hauled in for everything that happens in our turf. While I was there, I kind of let it slip that y'all were heading for Texas, so that's where they're looking. He took a drag on a cigarette and cussed it good-naturedly for not being a cool. Johnny listened in admiration. You sure can cuss good, Dally. Sure can, Dally agreed wholeheartedly, proud of his vocabulary, but don't you kids get to picking up my bad habits. He gave me a hard rub on the head. Kid, I swear, it don't look like you with your hair all cut off. It used to look tough. You and Soda had the coolest looking hair in town. I know, I said sourly. I look lousy, but don't rub it in. Do you all want something to eat or not? Johnny and I leapt up. You better believe it. Gee, Johnny said wistfully, it sure will be good to get into a car again. Well, Dally drawled, I'll give you a ride for your money. Dally always did like to drive fast. If he didn't care whether he got where he was going or not, and we came down the red dirt road off J Mountain doing 85. I like fast driving, and Johnny was crazy about drag races, but we both got a little green around the gills when Dally took a corner on 2 wheels with the brakes screaming. Maybe it was because we hadn't been in a car for so long. We stopped at a Dairy Queen, and the first thing I got was a Pepsi. Johnny and I gorged on barbecue sandwiches and banana splits. Glory, Dallas said, amazed, watching us gulp the stuff down. You don't need to make like every mouthful's your last. I got plenty of money. Take it easy. I don't want you getting sick on me. I thought I was hungry. Johnny merely ate faster. I didn't slow down until I got a headache. I didn't tell y'all something, Dally said, finishing his 3rd hamburger. The Socs and us are having all-out warfare all over the city. That kid you killed had plenty of friends, and all over town it's Soc against Grease. We can't walk alone at all. I started carrying a heater. Dally, I said, frightened. You kill people with heaters. You kill 'em with switchblades, too, don't you, kid? Dally said in a hard voice. Johnny gulped. Don't worry, Dally went on. It ain't loaded. I ain't aiming to get picked up for murder, but it sure does help a bluff. Tim Shepard's gang and our outfit are having it out with the Socs tomorrow night at the vacant lot. We got hold of the president of one of their social clubs and had a war council. Yeah, Dally sighed, and I knew he was remembering New York. Just like the good old days. If they win, things go on as usual. If we do, they stay out of our territory. They stay out of our territory, but good. Two-Bit got jumped a few days ago. Derry and me came along in time, but he wasn't having too much trouble. Two-Bit's a good fighter. Hey, didn't I tell you we got us a spy? A spy? Johnny looked up from his banana split. Who? That good-looking broad I tried to pick up that night you killed the Soch. The redhead. Cherry, what's her name? Chapter 6. Johnny gagged, and I almost dropped my hot fudge sundae. Cherry? We both said at the same time. The Soch? Yeah, Dally said. She came over to the vacant lot the night Two-Bit was jumped. Shepard and some of his outfit and us were hanging around there when she drives up in her little old Stingray. That took a lot of nerve. Some of us was jumping her then and there, her being the dead kid's girl and all, but Two-Bit stopped us. Man, next time I want a broad, I'll pick up my own kind. Yeah, Johnny said slowly, and I wondered if, like me, he was remembering another voice, also tough, and just deepened into manhood, saying, next time you want a broad, you pick up your own kind. Gave me the creeps. Dally was going on. She said she felt that whole mess was her fault, which it is, and that she'd keep up with what was coming off with the Soches in the rumble, and would testify that the Soches were drunk and looking for a fight, and you fought back in self-defense. He gave a grim laugh. That little gal sure does hate me. I offered to take her over to the Dingo for a Coke, and she said no thank you, and told me where I could go in very polite terms. She was afraid of loving you, I thought. So Cherry Valance, the cheerleader, Bob's girl, the Soch, was trying to help us. No, it wasn't Cherry the Soch who was helping us. It was Cherry the dreamer, who watched sunsets and couldn't stand fights. It was hard to believe a Soch would help us, even a Soch that dug sunsets. Dally didn't notice. He had forgotten about it already. Man, this place is out of it. What do they do for kicks around here? Play checkers? Dally surveyed the scene without interest. I ain't ever been in the country before. Have you two? Johnny shook his head, but I said, Dad used to take us all hunting. I've been in the country before. How'd you know about the church? I got a cousin that lives around here somewheres. Tipped me off that it'd make a tough hideout in case of something. Hey, Ponyboy, I heard you was the best shot in the family. Yeah, I said. Derry always got the most ducks, though. Him and Dad. Soda and I goofed around too much. Scared most of our game away. I couldn't tell Dally that I hated to shoot things. He'd think I was soft. That was a good idea. I mean, cutting your hair and bleaching it. They printed your descriptions in the paper, but you sure wouldn't fit 'em now. Johnny had been quietly finishing his 5th barbecue sandwich, but now he announced, We're going back and turn ourselves in. It was Dally's turn to gag. Then he swore a while. Then he turned to Johnny and demanded, What? I said we're going back and turning ourselves in, Johnny repeated in a quiet voice. I was surprised but not shocked. I had thought about turning ourselves in lots of times, but apparently the whole idea was a jolt to Dallas. I got a good chance of being let off easy, Johnny said desperately, and didn't know if it was Dally he was trying to convince or himself. I ain't got no record with a fuzz, and it was self-defense. Ponyboy and Cherry can testify to that, and I don't aim to stay in that church all my life. That was quite a speech for Johnny. His big, black eyes were bigger than ever at the thought of going to the police station, for Johnny had a deathly fear of cops. But he went on, We won't tell that you helped us, Dally, and we'll give you back the gun and what's left of the money, and say we hitchhiked back so you won't get into trouble, okay? Dally was chewing the corner of his ID card, which gave his age as 21 so he could buy liquor. You sure you want to go back? Us greasers get it worse than anyone else. Johnny nodded. I'm sure. It ain't fair for Ponyboy to have to stay up in that church with Derry and Soda worrying all about him all the time. I don't guess. He swallowed and tried not to look eager. I don't guess my parents are worried about me or anything. The boys are worried, Dally said in a matter-of-fact voice. Two-Bit was going to Texas to hunt for you. My parents, Johnny repeated doggedly. Did they ask about me? No, snapped Dally. They didn't. Blast it, Johnny. What do they matter? Shoot, my old man don't give a hang whether I'm in jail or dead in a car wreck or drunk in the gutter. That don't bother me none. Johnny didn't say anything, but he stared at the dashboard with such hurt bewilderment that I could have bawled. Dally cussed under his breath and nearly tore out the transmission of the T-Bird as we roared out of the Dairy Queen. I felt sorry for Dally. He meant it when he said he didn't care about his parents, but he and the rest of the gang knew Johnny cared and did everything they could to make it up to him. I don't know what it was about Johnny. Maybe that lost puppy look and those big scared eyes were what made everyone his big brother. But they couldn't, no matter how hard they tried, take the place of his parents. I thought about it for a minute. Derry and Soda Pop were my brothers, and I loved both of them, even if Derry did scare me. But not even Soda could take Mom and Dad's place, and they were my real brothers, not just sort of adopted ones. No wonder Johnny was hurt because his parents didn't want him. Dally could take it. Dally was the breed that could take anything, because he was hard and tough, and when he wasn't, he could turn hard and tough. Johnny was a good fighter, and could play it cool, but he was sensitive, and that isn't a good way to be when you're a greaser. "Blast it, Johnny," Dally growled as we flew along the red road. "Why didn't you think of turning yourself in 5 days ago? It would have saved a lot of trouble." "I was scared," Johnny said with conviction. "I still am." He ran his finger down one of his short black sideburns. "I guess we ruined our hair for nothing, pony boy." "I guess so. I was glad we were going back. I was sick of that church. I didn't care if I was bald." Dally was scowling, and from long and painful experience I knew better than to talk to him when his eyes were blazing like that. I'd likely as not get clobbered over the head. That had happened before, just as it had happened to all the gang at one time or another. We rarely fought among ourselves. Derry was the unofficial leader, since he kept his head best. Soda and Steve had been best friends since grade school and never fought, and Two-Bit was just too lazy to argue with anyone. Johnny kept his mouth shut too much to get into arguments, and nobody ever fought with Johnny. I kept my mouth shut too, but Dally was a different matter. If something beefed him, he didn't keep quiet about it, and if you rubbed him the wrong way, look out. Not even Derry wanted to tangle with him. He was dangerous. Johnny just sat there and stared at his feet. He hated for any one of us to be mad at him. He looked awful sad. Dally glanced at him out of the corner of his eye. I looked out the window. "Johnny," Dally said in a pleading, high voice, using a tone I had never heard him before. "Johnny, I ain't mad at you. I just don't want you to get hurt. You don't know what a few months in jail can do to you." "Oh, blast it, Johnny." He pushed his white blonde hair back out of his eyes. "You get hardened in jail. I don't want that to happen to you, like it happened to me." I kept staring out the window, at the rapidly passing scenery, but I felt my eyes getting round. Dally never talked like that, never. Dally didn't give a Yankee dime about anyone but himself, and he was cold and hard and mean. He never talked about his past or being in jail that way. If he talked about it at all, it was to brag, and suddenly I thought of Dally, in jail at the age of 10. Dally, growing up in the streets. "Would you rather have me living in hideouts for the rest of my life, always on the run?" Johnny asked seriously. If Dally had said yes, Johnny would have gone back to the church without hesitation. He figured Dally knew more than he did, and Dally's word was law. But he never heard Dally's answer, for we had reached the top of Jay Mountain, and Dally suddenly slammed on the brakes and stared. "Oh, glory," he whispered. The church was on fire. "Let's go see what the deal is," I said, hopping out. "What for?" Dally sounded irritated. "Get back in here before I beat your head in." I knew Dally would have to park the car and catch me before he could carry out his threat, and Johnny was already out and following me, so I figured I was safe. We could hear him cussing us out, but he wasn't mad enough to come after us. There was a crowd at the front of the church, mostly little kids, and I wondered how'd they'd gotten there so quickly.